Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a new attack against SSL hits the web, and it's called Poodle. However, it appears there's no easy fix. We've got the details, plus the zero-day bug that exposes other zero-day bugs, HP signs malware, and then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 184 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on October 16th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. You've got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody.
Hey, Alan, I know I spied you eating some chocolate before the show, so you're probably going to be all fired up. If you're anything like my kids... I don't
get fired up.
Really? Because, see, when my kids seem to have a little chocolate, they turn into what I like to call monsters. So that's not going to happen, you're saying?
No.
Must be a Canadian thing then. Well, a big show today, Alan. And
Sure.
I've learned from our recent episodes that we shouldn't waste too much time up at the beginning talking about small things, because then we end up having a 2-hour episode. This first story...
2.5-hour episode.
Right. This first story, it was a Krebs on security story, and it's kind of like one of those, hey, man, I hear you like bugs, so I put zero-day bugs in your zero-day bug tracker. What happened, Alan?
Yeah. So researchers discovered a flaw in Bugzilla, which is a bug tracker. And with that flaw, they would be able to see bugs that were hidden because they were 0 days. So, for example, if there's a new flaw found in an important piece of software like Mozilla Firefox or an operating system, Red Hat uses Bugzilla, and so on and so on, the details are put into a private bug in the Bugzilla bug tracker so that they can track it. And only those with need to know can view that bug, right? Like a security officer, people working on the patch, or whatever. And regular people can't see the details of the bug, because if the details of 0 day get out, then somebody could exploit it before a patch gets made.
It's like the Rackspace CEO said last week, it's like ringing the dinner bell for hackers.
Exactly. So once a patch is shipped, maybe some of the details from the bug will get released, but in general, the actual content of the original bug never gets made public. So it's important that the details remain secret until the users have had a chance to patch. Otherwise, a malactor could, from reading about the 0 day from the White Hat researcher or whatever, and even using the proof of concept code the White Hat person wrote to prove the bug, could then quickly start using it against people, and that would be bad. And so the security and privacy of the bug tracker are very important, practically imperative. Well, researchers at the security firm Checkpoint Software discovered that it was possible to create Bugzilla user accounts that bypass the validation process. Specifically, so normally when you sign up for an account, it sends that verification email to prove your email address and stuff. But during one of the steps of the sign up, you can basically spoof parts of your user data. In particular, you can change your login name without changing your email address. So it says, our exploit allows us to bypass that and register using any email address we want, even if we don't have access to the email address. Because there's no validation that you actually control that domain, and because of the way permissions work in Bugzilla, we can get administrative privileges simply by registering using an address from one of the domains of the Bugzilla installation owner. For example, they registered a new account using their email address, but with a username of admin@mozilla.org, and suddenly they could see every private bug under Firefox and everything else at Mozilla.
So it's just taking the domain.
Well, basically, the way the permissions work in Bugzilla is they use a regular expression against the email address, and if you work at Mozilla, then you get automatic privileges.
Right, to the Mozilla stuff.
Right, wow. And so basically they signed up with their email address, but then spoofed the one field that has the username that's actually the one that's used for the permissions to say admin@mozilla.org, even though their email address isn't that. And they said, an attacker creating a new Bugzilla account can override certain parameters when finalizing the account creation that can lead to the user being created with a different email address than originally requested, right? So basically, you sign up with your real email address, get the verification email, and then modify some stuff in the link you would click to verify your email, and it'll overwrite your old email address with the fake one. So now you've confirmed an email for, whoever at gmail.com and then quickly change the email address to admin@mozilla.org, and now you have access. The overridden login name could be automatically added to groups based on the group's regular expression settings. So the flaw is obviously very serious, as it might expose previously private zero-day exploits for many different open source products. So the people that found it said that the fact that this was there for 10 years and no one saw it up until now kind of goes to show that, while open source stuff means that we can find these bugs, it doesn't help if nobody's looking.
We've been talking about that a lot lately, huh?
Yeah. If nation states adversaries had access to private bug data, they would have a ball with this.
Oh my gosh.
There's no way to find out if someone did exploit this other than going through the list of users and seeing if there's someone that shouldn't be there.
Don't you almost feel like after what we've learned in the last year that we should be giving them the benefit of the doubt that they are figuring this stuff out, that they have entire teams of people that are looking for things like this?
Maybe.
Maybe, right? Yeah, I know. Who knows?
There's a story in the roundup later on that kind of brings up that point, although I think they might be trying to ride the wave there a little bit. But anyway.
Yeah, okay.
The perception that many eyes have looked at open source code and it's secure because so many people have looked at it is a bit false. Because no one really audits code unless they're committed to do so or they're paid to do so, we see lots of these foolish little bugs because, nobody looks at that part of Bugzilla.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Mm-hmm. Goes back to that incentive structure to look for these things.
Exactly. So in regards to when the story was posted at Krebs, Mozilla sent a response that he added to the bottom of the article. Regarding the comment in the first paragraph, while it's theoretically possible that other Bugzilla instances expose security bugs to all employees or something, Mozilla does not do this, and as a result, our security bugs are not available to potential exploiters of this flaw. At no time did Checkpoint get administrative privileges on bugzilla.mozilla.org. They did create an account called admin@mozilla.org, and that inherited the Netscape confidential privilege. But we stopped using this privilege a long time ago, before the reported vulnerability was introduced, and so they would have only had access to old stuff. Mm-hmm. They also created admin@mozilla.com, which inherited the Mozilla employee access. We do actively use that classification, but not for security bugs. In addition, on bugzilla.mozilla.org, Mozilla regularly checks at mozilla.com addresses against their employee database and would have caught any fraudulently created @mozilla.com accounts.
Okay.
Now, they say that, but they didn't seem to find the admin@mozilla.com one until this story came out. So regularly,
if we're checking the logs,
checking once a month is great, except for that there's a month where somebody was doing something they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
So they're saying that because of the way they're set up, they wouldn't have given access to zero-day flaws for Firefox with this, but some other place that used Mozilla or Bugzilla could have done that, right?
Yeah.
Mozilla is big enough that they wouldn't give out, access to the secret stuff to everybody at mozilla.org or mozilla.com or whatever.
Of course.
But smaller projects that are using Bugzilla might.
Yeah.
Or even companies using it, right? They would say, all right, everybody in the company can see this.
I probably would if I was doing a Jupiter Broadcasting bug tracker. I'd probably do it like that.
Exactly. Anybody with a Jupiter Broadcasting email address is allowed to see stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important. So the patch has already been released. You need to upgrade to Bugzilla 4.0.14 or higher.
Okay. Links to that in the show notes, too.
Yep.
It's funny because I guess it's sort of like another way to look at this is we often talk about the machine that has some of the worst security is like the Nagios system on your network.
Your monitoring machine, it's allowed through all your firewalls.
Right. This is sort of like the system admin equivalent of this in the software bug tracking world. It's like it's not quite the same thing, but I almost feel it relates in a weird way. Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
The support system or the bug tracker are sometimes the weakest link. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Good write-up from Krebs on that. Okay. Well, why don't we take a second and thank IX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and check out these guys. This is exactly where you want to go for some hardware that's going to be able to support any kind of solution that might leverage open source or something with high-end storage. Anything you want to have some scalability, some great support, and I think at the end of the day, people that have really, really deep expertise on the subjects. That's why Alan uses IX Systems for Scale Engine. That's why we use IX Systems for the storage here at the Jupiter Broadcasting Network. And the thing that's kind of cool about IX Systems is they have a pretty active What's New section on their website. Yep. Gives you some insights into what they think about what they're involved in. And they have a post over here called Spindles Still Matter.
Yes.
That's a great one.
That's an interesting one. especially now we're seeing, hard drives at 6 and 8 terabytes. And so people, when they're building a storage server, are tempted, I need this much space, so I'll just have 2 or 3 6 terabyte drives instead of like 8 2 terabyte drives.
Right.
It's like, well, yes, you'll get the same amount of storage, but it'll be slower now because you have fewer heads actually moving and doing the work. So they, set up this example. If you need about 15 terabytes of storage, you can do that with just 4 6 terabyte drives instead of 9 2 terabyte drives.
Mm-hmm.
But then your actual performance will be a lot slower. It could be the difference between being able to saturate a 10 gigabit Ethernet link and not. And so you might actually decide that buying the smaller drives is a better solution for now.
I love that they're thinking about this stuff all the time too.
Yep.
And trying it out.
And they also, they don't, everybody just thinks, I'll add an SSD cache and everything will be fast.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you have 15 terabytes of storage and you add a 500 gig SSD, and if it's for a cache, you're going to want like a high-end, very high endurance one, so it's going to be expensive.
Right.
I think I paid like $600 for a 200 terabyte one.
Yeah.
Then that's going to cache 500 gigabytes of that content. Well, if you're using all 15 terabytes, that's not going to help your speed very much at all.
No.
It's like half a terabyte of it will be fast, and the other 14.5 terabytes is going to be slow.
Sometimes those high write count SSDs also have a slower throughput as well, which can be an issue. So, and this is exactly this is the challenge they look at in this blog post. Spindle Still Matter. You can go to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and then click on their What's New link. Give a look at what IX Systems can do and give them a call too with some questions. Yep. If you're going to deploy some servers, some infrastructure, I think you've probably tried some of the other OEMs out there. I know I, as a contractor, worked with all of them. None of them match IX Systems from end to end, the best experience you can possibly get. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP, and you can also download that white paper to get started and check them out. And also say hi to Alan coming up soon at Meet BSD, right, Alan?
Yes, that's like 2 weeks away, right?
Man, oh man. Do we need a pre-record for that?
No, I leave Friday and get back Wednesday.
Same. So I go to Ohio. I leave for Ohio Linux Fest like right after TechSNAP, essentially, or a little bit after TechSNAP. So yeah. Cool. All right. Well,
but the other thing they mentioned is if you're building your storage server, what you have to consider is what's the least amount of performance I need, right? I need to guarantee that at least this level of performance will always be coming out of it.
Right.
Sure. With the SSD, it might be faster for this part, or under ideal conditions, it'll be really fast. But what's the worst case? You got to design for, I need it to be able to do at least this much all the time, and then spec out the array based on that, rather than being like, well, I need at least this much space, and, let's do this and that. That's why IX doesn't just have boxes built they're looking to sell you. They ask you, what are you using this for? What do you actually need? And why basically they have this pre-purchase consultation where you actually kind of go through exactly what you need the machine to do so they can make sure that you're going to be happy with it by making sure it's going to be able to do what you want it to do.
And that really works. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Thank you to IX Systems for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. So the big news this week is the Poodle attack. And I love the URL where you can find out more information, poodle.io. That's a great start.
Although that's not actually from the people that discovered it, but good job. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a good one anyways. All right, so
they did some good data on it as well.
So you want to break it down for us, Alan? Break it.
So there's a new attack against the SSL protocol. So that's the protocol itself, not an implementation. So it's not an OpenSSL bug or NSS or GNU TLS or any of the other implementations that we've seen bugs in before. This one's actually a problem with the protocol, with the specification on how to do it. And that's why it's even trickier to deal with, because this isn't something that can be patched, basically. So Poodle, the name stands for the Padding Oracle on Downgraded Legacy Encryption, or POODLE.
Gotcha. Okay.
So for reasons of backwards compatibility, and because the internet is a mess of legacy crap, many SSL and TLS clients implement what's called a downgrade dance in the protocol handshake. So when they're connecting to a server, they try, this is the strongest protocol I support, and they try to connect to the server, and if that doesn't work, they then try the second highest protocol and try again, and the next highest and try again until they get a connection that actually works. Instead of a proper way to do it now would be just be like, hey, I do this one. Oh, well, I only do this one. Okay, well then let's use the highest one we agree on. Part of that goes back to SSL 1 and SSL 2 when and different implementations. Some companies' implementation was buggy, so in order for your client to connect, if it didn't work, you had to just downgrade and try again, kind of thing. On top of the fact that it's horrible and insecure and so on, it also just has the thing that means it takes longer to establish a connection if you have to do this downgrade dance. Anyway, so the problem is that an attacker that's in position to perform a man-in-the-middle attack could interfere with the connection and cause the downgrade dance to happen. So when you try to negotiate a highly secure connection, they just cause it to get dropped. So then your client will be like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try the less secure one.
Yeah.
And they just keep doing that until you get to the least secure one. And then once you're using the vulnerable one, they can perform their man-in-the-middle attack and actually get the cookie to take over your PayPal account or whatever. The other problem is that the downgrade could also be caused coincidentally just by dropped packets, right? So if you're on a weak Wi-Fi or mobile connection and your handshake gets dropped, your client might automatically downgrade to weaker encryption just because it thinks it had a problem connecting when it was actually just a weak connection. And so, it's not really a good way to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
So if both the client and server support TLS 1.2, but the attacker causes the connection to be dropped, and it'll drop to a TLS 1.1, 1.0, and then down to SSL 3. SSL 3 is obsolete, right? It was originally released back in 1996.
Yeah.
And so has, old crypto that's long been broken. Right? It only supports RC4, which we've known is vulnerable for quite a while and have stopped using. And it also supports some block ciphers in CBC mode, but in particular, in this case, this is the attack that they found against SSL. So after they force you to downgrade to SSL 3, they have their own attack that will basically, by changing the padding and tweaking stuff during being in man-in-the-middle, they can decrypt cookies or whatever in the header of your HTTP connection 1 byte at a time. So it might take them up to 256 tries to get each 1 byte, but your cookie's only going to be a couple of characters, like maybe 10 or 20 or whatever. And so, in a couple of minutes, they could probably recover your entire cookie. And then they can use that to log in as you on PayPal or whatever. Or, they can get other stuff. It's just not quite as easy. But the paper describes it in full detail with all the math and everything. But the point is that they could trick, even though your client's brand new, you're using like the latest Chrome or Firefox, and the server's all up to date with the latest everything. An attacker in the middle could basically fiddle with that connection enough to cause you to downgrade to weak encryption. And then once you're using the weak encryption, they can exploit it. And unlike the Beast attack or other ones, there's no way to mitigate this particular attack. So in order to combat the attack, the easy option would just be, well, let's disable this SSL 3 protocol that that was invented in 96 and most people have stopped using. The problem is that Internet Explorer 6 on Windows XP only supports SSL 2 and 3 by default.
Of course. Surprise, surprise.
Apparently, it actually has support to do TLS 1.0, but it's disabled by default. And so, obviously, nobody uses it. And it's not like something that the default couldn't just be changed with a Windows update, because, if you're still on XP with IE 6, you're probably not installing your Windows updates.
Yeah. Yeah. Are they even pushing out updates?
And so, what they've done instead of what they're proposing is to create a new cipher select variable to go in the handshake called TLS fallback SCSV. So basically, the way this extension works is if the client does do a downgrade dance in each handshake after it started downgrading, it includes this special fallback option in the headers. So the first time, so it tries to connect with the highest protocol, and if that doesn't work, when it tries with the second highest protocol, it includes this header saying, hey, I'm in fallback mode. And then the server looks at it and says, all right, if you're falling back, but the version you're proposing to use is lower than the highest version I support, then I'm going to reject the connection, because it means something funny is going on, right? Because you should have been able to connect with TLS 1.2, because I support TLS 1.2 as well, but you're trying 1.1 in downgrade mode means that you tried 1.2 and it didn't work. And so it basically causes the connection to be rejected instead. And basically, by having the client implement this, it would mean that someone doing this downgrade attack wouldn't be able to trick you into going to a lower protocol.
Mm.
And it would also cause the lost packet ones to not have that problem. Although it'd be interesting to see if precisely timed drop packet would cause you to not be able to connect to an SSL site instead of right, because it would cause you to go into downgrade mode, and then the site would say, well, no, I don't want to downgrade, just because the packet got lost or whatever. So it's hard to say. But that doesn't seem like it would happen very often because, TCP will retry and so on. And not all SSL clients do the downgrade dance, right? It's actually not part of the protocol. It's just something some clients do to try to always make a connection no matter what. So like I said, the issue with just disabling SSL3 is that older clients and servers, especially Windows XP, and because even if you have Windows XP and IE6 or whatever, and it's like, well, it doesn't matter because I use Firefox or Chrome, the problem is that embedded applications that embed a web browser in themselves, like Steam, are still using Internet Explorer.
Right. Or like I mentioned before, like the Star Trek Online patcher, and I think Star Wars Online also uses IE embedded.
Yeah, lots of different things do.
Yeah.
And like I said, IE6 apparently includes support for TLS. It's just disabled. So if you have to use it, you can go and turn it on. The problem is that websites are kind of hesitant to just turn off SSL3 and lock out all those users. Also, many older appliances, including some load balancers that sit in front of websites and so on, sometimes only support the older protocols, and people haven't upgraded that hardware or the firmware on them. So the site Poodle.io did a survey of the Alexa top 1 million websites to try to figure out what the numbers look like. And they found that 0.12% of the top 1 million websites that have SSL support only SSL3. So that's actually very low, which is good. So basically what they found is that of the sites that do SSL, 40.9% do 1.0, 7% or 0.7% do 1.1, and 58.3% will support TLS 1.2. So most places support at least TLS 1.0, and there's only a small number of sites that only support SSL v3. So as far as the servers are concerned, we're not in a bad place. Now, when they looked at it, 96.9% of websites do support SSL v3. So there's only 3.1% of the websites on the internet that would return away a Windows XP IE6 user currently. I expect that number to shift wildly in the next couple of weeks as more and more people switch that off.
I'm looking right now. They also have the Elixir HTTPS sites without TLS support. Citibank.com, MarketWatch.com.
So these are the ones that have SSL v3 only, and they'll refuse your connection if you disable v3 in your client.
And this is
so I followed the instructions to disable SSL v3 in Firefox. Yeah. And if I try to go to Citibank.com over HTTPS, I get an error saying that it couldn't negotiate a protocol.
Okay. And so this is going to start happening in
what? In particular, Firefox version 37, was it?
37 or 38?
34.
Okay.
So 2 versions away from what's live right now.
In November.
Starting with the nightlies like yesterday.
Right.
Firefox is not going to support SSL3 by default.
Right. And I think Chrome in like another there, rev or two is also going to drop it.
So based on that, the sites on this first big list of websites here will stop working. Now, in particular, that, like I said, that list includes Citibank.com, which uses SSL 3.0 only in a weak 1024-bit cipher or certificate. But when you actually go to it, all it does is redirect you to online.citibank.com, which is set up securely with a 2048-bit certificate,
okay.
No SSL3, and strong TLS 1.2. So it seems they just have a load balancer or something sitting on the front page of the website, then redirects you to the subdomain.
Yep.
But it's using an old certificate that wouldn't even be allowed to be bought now because it's not strong enough. And for some reason, only supports SSL 3.0. I'm sure they'll upgrade that soon. They probably don't even think about it because it's not the one that's actually dealing with any traffic. All it's doing is redirecting people that go to Citibank.com instead of online.citibank.com.
I bet.
I'm not sure why they separated it like they did, but,
Still a pretty big list.
I remember when I disabled too many of the ciphers in my browser, I couldn't load some stuff off my bank's website. Like, the web page would load and I could log in and stuff, but one of the JavaScript files loaded from a different subdomain that had an older server that didn't have the protocol or something, and it wouldn't let me stop using RC4.
EasyNews.com. Crap. Dang, Alan.
Yeah. So in the links, I've also included a link to Google's security blog post where they talk about this and link to the paper. Adam Langley, who's popular for doing boring SSL and working on Chrome and so on, has his page about Poodle, including where he talks a little bit about how ways they tried to think of to work around Poodle instead of having to kill off the XP support. But no. And then a link to the paper called This Poodle Bites, exploiting the SSL 3.0 fallback, and then a link to the poodle.io, which on top of this list of websites and stuff, if you go to the very, very top, it has Sysadmin's Guide, How to Disable SSL v3 in Common Server Products.
Boom. And
Internet Users Guide, How to Disable SSL v3 in Common Web Browsers.
Boom.
So the servers one covers Nginx, Apache, Microsoft IIS, Postfix, SendMail, Dovecot, HAProxy, Courier IMAP, Light HTTP, et cetera, et cetera.
Dang, that's great.
Yeah.
That's very handy. So links to those in the show notes.
Yep.
Poodle. And this another one. You know, a lot of these now, Alan, before they come out, you start to hear a day or two, there's going to be something big dropping about SSL or Zen. You start to hear it a couple of days before it lands.
Yeah.
And so you can almost plan on it. Okay, Alan, well, then we'll take a break right here, and we'll thank our next sponsor, and that's Ting. Go to techsnap.ting.com. Won't you go there right now? techsnap.ting.com. Let them know that you appreciate them supporting the show, and then take a look around to see what Ting offers. This is my mobile service provider now for a while. Ting customers have saved, on average, $37.57 per device per month. $37.57 per device per month. They just redid their whole customer dashboard. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But first, let me just take a moment to tell you about why I use Ting. It's really simple. No contract, no early termination fee. And the key part, because I have 3 phones, so I've got 3 lines, it's a flat $6 for each line, and then it's just my usage on top of that. So right now, I've got the Nexus 5, and I think I'm going to be sticking with the Nexus 5 for a while. But I loaded the new Android L beta on here, and it is awesome. So I've got the Nexus 5 unlocked on the Ting network that I bought, and then I put it on Ting, and because I went to techsnap.ting.com, I got a $25 service credit. And if you bought a device, they give you $25 off your first device. They have a whole batch of great devices, including ones with their warehouse sale. And what's awesome about Ting is not only do they have the dashboard that they just updated, but they have no-hold customer service. So you can call them right now, 1-855-TING-FTW, anytime between 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., business time, and a real person answers the phone, and they can answer your questions. TechSNAP.ting.com is where to go to also try out their savings calculator, plug in your current usage, and see how much you would save if you switch to only paying for what you use. You know, the way it should actually be done. But I haven't checked out this video yet, but they just released a brand new video on the new dashboard updates. So let's give it a go. Let's check it out and see what they've done. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, that does look really good. So they've broken it out by line. You can get your nicknames on there so you see your usage at a glance for all the phones in one screen. Get the megabytes used. Hide caller ID settings, allow devices to tether, send and receive picture video messages, all can be toggled off through the control panel. Usage alerts for any particular phone, so like I could have Angie's phone or my phone and we can send an alert like an email or a text message. Also can set caps. That's nice too. Set it right there. Disable it when the data reaches 500 megabytes or 5 gigabytes. Pull up billing history. Ooh, the new billing history looks sweet. Oh yeah, and they're also right there in the dashboard now. If you refer a friend, like you can tweet out a link or something like that, you get a $50 service credit. That's a pretty nice. So you think about the Ting prices. Like right now, when I log into my dashboard, I just did this a little bit ago before the show. I like to just kind of see where I'm at with all my devices because I've got 3 lines and 2 of them get quite a bit of heavy usage. So when I log in right now, I can see that my current Ting bill, this is my account here, is $35. That'll be how much I pay for $35, and you get an idea of exactly the usage. And if I scroll down, it'd break it out by phone and the number and how much each line is taking. And that's my Ting dashboard for 3 devices. That's a pretty great deal right there, $35, because we're only paying for what we use. Go to techsnap.ting.com, and if you're savvy like we are with our Wi-Fi, I think you'll be amazed at how much you can save. And if you've been paying for minute plans that you don't use all of them, or megabytes where you don't use all of them, that's a scam. Go to techsnap.ting.com, try out their savings calculator, see what I've been talking about. And a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. techsnap.ting.com. Okay, so it looks like HP might have a little egg on their face. Is that what's going on? Like, I heard they're revoking some certificates.
Yeah, so it could cause some problems if you have some older HP software.
Like 2010 era? Or older?
No, anything older than... I'm not sure when they would have stopped signing with that certificate, but yes, anything older at all, basically.
Okay. So what's going on?
So earlier this week, HP quietly produced several client advisories stating that on October 21st, which is only a couple of days from now, it plans to revoke a digital certificate the company previously used to cryptographically sign software components that ship with many of its older products. HP said it is taking this step out of an abundance of caution because it discovered that the certificate may mistakenly have been used to sign malicious software back in 2010.
What?
So code signing is a way to ensure that software you're running on your system is actually from the author it claims to be from.
Right.
Right. So you've seen this in newer versions of Windows. You double click on something and it pops up, this software is from so-and-so, or doesn't say if it's not signed. Right. So that way, anybody before, if you right click on an executable, went to properties and dug into the details and say made by Microsoft, and it's like, well, when you wrote software in Visual Basic 6, you could write anything you wanted in that little box, and it would say it was made by that person. So code signing basically said, no, we as a certificate authority or something have checked, and we're sure that yes, this is actually made by HP or Microsoft or whatever. And with newer versions of Windows, Microsoft has gotten to where if you install a driver, it has to be signed. So that malware, specifically rootkits, can't install a driver because it won't be signed. And that way, it prevents those from getting in and making a mess of your system. And yes, and on some high security systems, like software, especially used on servers and stuff at banks, you can't run any software that's not signed, right? So, if you want to use some external software, you have to get it signed by somebody first and only use that particular binary that's been signed. It was interesting. It came up on FreeBSD mailing list the other day as somebody in a secure environment, they're using a driver on FreeBSD, and they have to pay to get it audited and signed every time it gets upgraded.
Really?
And so they really like the fact that if they get a binary for FreeBSD 10.0, it'll work with 10.1 and 10.2 because it costs a lot of money to get it signed, and doing it fewer times is better for them. Anyway, so except in cases where the malware author manages to get their malware signed, either by gaining access to a trusted code signing certificate or by tricking someone with a certificate into signing it for them, and those are the two cases when malware can actually be signed and get through this protection. So one of the most popular previous instances of signed malware was Stuxnet. Right? There were a bunch of components, including I think one of the drivers for the rootkit, that had been signed by various certificates, apparently that had been stolen or breached and used to sign the certificates. And if you remember back to February of 2013, there's a company called Bit9 that makes a whitelisting software.
Oh, yes.
Basically, if you're in a secure environment, you set up your system so only software on this list of programs we've checked will be allowed to run in your system, and so all malware will be blocked.
Boy, it's been a while since we talked about that.
Yes, they got compromised, and 32 different pieces of malware ended up getting whitelisted and be allowed to run on those systems.
Yes.
We covered that back on TechSNAP episode 100.
Hey-o, it was a little while ago. Yeah.
That was that was 84 weeks ago, which is more than a year ago. But it happens to be a very special episode of TechSNAP, so you should definitely check that one out. Anyway, so it's happened before, but it's fairly rare that you see malware that's signed. And so in this case, it's kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So according to HP's Global Chief of Information Security, Brett Whalen, nothing quite so sexy or dramatic was involved in HP's decision to revoke this particular certificate. Whalen said HP is recently alerted by Symantec about a curious 4-year-old Trojan horse program that appears to have been signed with one of HP's private certificates. and found on a server outside of HP's network. Further investigation traced the problem back to malware infection on an HP developer's computer. So one person's computer was compromised, and that's how it happened. It's curious does that mean that one guy's machine has been compromised for the last 4 years? 4.5 years even, I guess?
Well, probably.
It's hard to say. It's like, is he still using the same machine after that long? They should give him
probably,
an upgrade.
yeah.
And if not, it's like, otherwise, how do they go back and check something like that?
Yeah.
Anyway.
It probably is that, actually.
Yeah. HP investigators believe the Trojan on the developer's PC renamed itself to mimic one of the file names the company typically uses in its software testing, and that the malicious file was inadvertently included in the package of software that was later signed with the company's digital certificate. And so basically, they snuck it in with some other files that were getting signed and got the malware signed. The company believes the malware got off of HP's internal network because it contained a mechanism designed to transfer a copy of the file back to its point of origin. So it kind of seems like the people who compromised this developer's computer knew that he had access to the code signing, and so slipped their file in, got it signed, and then had a way to slip their file back out so they could have a copy of it to use. So it's like, how many other things got signed that way? And it seems like because we didn't hear about this Trojan horse until years later, that really kind of leans toward the nation state actor kind of thing, doesn't it? You know, where they used this signed malware against a specific target, right? Being able to have signed malware is highly valuable. So you don't go using it everywhere. You save, because, you know, once you do, Symantec's going to find it and plug the hole. So, you know, they only used it on very high value targets. So then the security officer from HP says, when people hear this, many will automatically assume we had some sort of compromise within our code signing infrastructure, and that is not the case. We can show that we've never had a breach of our certificate authority and that our code signing infrastructure is 100% intact. Even if the security concerns from this incident are minimal, the revocation of the certificate is likely to create support issues for some customers. The certificate in question expired several years ago, and so it can't be used to sign new files. So even if they had breached the certificate authority, they wouldn't be able to, anything new they signed with it wouldn't be trusted anymore anyway. But according to HP, it was used to sign a huge swath of HP software, including critical hardware and software drivers.
Oh my gosh.
And other components that interact with fundamental ways with the Microsoft Windows operating system.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing that pops up is even Microsoft doesn't know the answer to this of what will happen on systems with a restore partition, right? If you bought an actual HP laptop or something and it has one of those recovery partitions, if you're, and you need to restore your system and it tries to use a driver and then Windows 7 rejects the driver saying, hey, that driver's not signed, 64-bit Windows requires drivers to be signed or
no network card for you.
Yeah. And even Microsoft doesn't know what happens in this case. And I said that, and they can't test it in their test lab yet until on October 21st when VeriSign revokes their certificate. They said, our PC group is working through trying to create solutions to help customers if they actually become a real-world scenario. But in the end, there's something we can't test in our lab until the certificate is officially revoked. So that raises a couple of questions. A, how practical is it to revoke a single signature on a specific file? Right? With SSL certificates, when you're giving a certificate to a site, you can revoke the certificate for a specific site. I don't know how that works for code signing, right? Because you're signing the executable saying this is trusted or whatever, or I've verified the identity on this, but I don't know how you can, how easy it is to revoke the certificate for a specific binary. Like, oh, this driver is known to be bad, we're going to revoke the certificate.
Yeah.
So, if this were to happen more, would we see the problem of we have to revoke everything because we don't have a good way of revoking individual files?
I'm thinking, right?
Although in this case, if the developer's machine's been compromised for that long, they don't know how many files might have gotten signed, and so it's easier to revoke everything than to try to, pick through the list and make sure that nothing ever got signed that wasn't allowed, wasn't good and genuine.
Yeah.
Because I doubt their certificate signing infrastructure was smart enough to say, I'm going to keep a copy of every file we ever signed so we can go back and trace later if we have to. No way,
I'm sure not. Yeah.
Exactly. And so all they have is a hash of a file, which doesn't let them get the file to tell if it's actually good. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if maybe even something like, there's not something like the CA/browser forum that there is for browsers, but for code signing if certificate authorities might actually be forced to start keeping a catalog of everything they sign so that it can be investigated further, so there's an audit trail going back
Isn't
later.
it just incredible, though, that no matter what kind of system they design and engineer, something like this can still happen?
Yeah. Also, it raises the question, how will machines find out about the revocation of the HP certificate? Right?
Yeah.
In a browser, you're on the internet and you can do the online certificate status protocol or download a certificate revocation list.
It seems like they would only check when they go to check for a driver update for that specific
it's like
device.
when you try to install a driver,
That's when it would check, right?
does it make a connection out to the internet to check?
Well, sometimes it'll search for the best suitable driver. Maybe when
Right. Yeah, and sure, it goes and talks to Windows Update, but what if you're on a secure system that doesn't allow access to the internet?
or you use WSUS.
Yeah, and a bunch of stuff. So it's like,
I don't know.
how does it find out about the revocation of the HP certificate? Because obviously, it doesn't seem like it's going to check the status of every certificate every time the driver gets loaded or something. And so does that mean the revocation will come in as a Windows Update instead? And then how much longer before it's actually there? It just, it doesn't seem like a good thing to have Windows calling out to the internet to check the certificate every time you run a signed binary or something.
No, I'm sure that's not the case.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't think.
How's that going to fit in there? And, there's a lot of questions about how the certificate stuff actually works in the end.
Yeah. Now we're all kinds of curious.
Because the other thing is, so if I have the driver installed and a certificate gets revoked, does Windows stop loading that driver?
I see. I wouldn't think it would.
Will this impact already installed systems? Like, obviously, they're talking about these.
How could they? 'Cause what if
recovery
it's
systems?
How could they disable it? Because what if it's like your SCSI adapter or
Yeah.
your RAID array or whatever or your network card? They can't just turn it off. Especially since they,
isn't that what they're supposed to do if the driver's revoked? And if not, then what good is it? Because if a piece of malware gets signed and then they revoke the certificate for that malware and it still gets loaded, what was the point?
It seems like the only time it's really good is if it's at the point of time where you're loading it and it checks it at that point in time to see if it's signed. And it says, okay.
And it's, there's never supposed to be something bad getting through the signing process.
Right, exactly.
But how do they not consider the case of what happens if something does?
Because they're so smart and so perfect.
Well, it's because a lot of this is kind of smoke and mirrors, right? It's like, oh yeah, everything's signed, it's cryptographic, it's good.
Right. Yeah, it is a little bit at the end of the day, the goal, isn't it?
It's, hand waving and cliches as we talk about.
Yeah, and it shows you when you kind of break down the implementation, it shows you that's kind of the major overarching motivation. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story? No?
No.
Okay. Well, then I'll tell you about something I've got thoughts on. That's DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com right now and go check them out. And go get started on building yourself something. Maybe some back-end infrastructure. Shoot, I don't know what you got needs for. I use it for OwnCloud, BitTorrent, Sync. We use it to run some back-end scripts for processing and publishing information, and it's so easy to use. If you're not familiar with DigitalOcean, I want to recommend you go check them out. And also arm yourself with a little bit of savings because we've got a promo code SNAPOctober. SNAPOctober, all one word. Lowercase. So what is DigitalOcean? DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Users can get a cloud server created in probably less than 55 seconds, and pricing plans start at only $5 per month. That'll get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, one CPU, and a terabyte of blazing fast transfer. DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. But let me tell you about that interface. I know, it's super fancy. They got regional diversity, but it's that dashboard. That control panel is super intuitive. It is so great and yet so powerful, and power users can replicate that dashboard with DigitalOcean's straightforward API. I love this feature. The interface is super simple. You've got to go check it out. And if you use our promo code SNAPOctober, you're going to get a $10 credit. So go spin up yourself a Core OS box or a Fedora rig or an Ubuntu LTS machine with the LAMP stack or GitLab or OwnCloud. They have a bunch of one-click installations that makes deploying applications easier than ever. But DigitalOcean's also rolling out something new. So they've already got the entire SSD infrastructure. They've got Tier 1 bandwidth. They've got the incredible dashboard. And they got the value, especially when you use our promo code SNAPOctober. But now they also want to have the best tutorials on the internet. They want to make sure that nobody has better tutorials than DigitalOcean. And that's why they're willing to pay for them. You can earn up to $200 by writing a technical tutorial for DigitalOcean. I think this is perfect. They know you guys out there have something you could write up about, and they'll work with you too. So they'll do some of the editing to make sure it's not all on your shoulders. So if you got a tutorial you think you might be able to contribute, go to the link in our show notes and get paid to write for DigitalOcean up to $200. It's a pretty sweet deal. You can learn more on the DigitalOcean website. It's on their community page. Or follow the link in our show notes, DigitalOcean.com, and use the promo code SNAPOctober to get that $10 credit. So that way you can play with your own droplet for 2 months for absolutely free. DigitalOcean.com. Very nice. Alan, is there anything else we want to cover in the news section for today's show?
No, that's about it.
Should we give a plug for today's BSD Now, which sure. You know what? Now this time it's not even me not being able to pronounce it correctly.
Right. It's
Japanese?
Yes, it's Japanese, and it's just like, how did BSD get to Japan?
Do you know? Oh, okay. I thought it was something like, do you know about BSD or something like that?
I think it is. I forget exactly what the translation is.
So clever, you forgot it.
I didn't come up. I don't come up with the titles.
I know.
You can't blame me for how clever the titles usually are.
Yeah,
they're usually very clever.
Yes.
I don't come up with those.
Yeah, episode 59 of BSD Now hit the web today, and also, if you're one of the few in the Jupiter Broadcasting audience that follows all of the Apple stuff, the iPads and the 5K Retina iMacs and your payments and your Yosemites. Tech Talk Today, episode 77 will be out shortly, and that covered that keynote. We did our Mystery Science 3000 thing where we sit back and we heckle from the back of the school bus, in the back of the classroom, and cover it live. And it was a long show.
Why do they call it 4K instead of sticking with the regular thing based on the second number in the resolution instead of the first number?
Because it sounds really cool, I think. And the iMac is 5K. So
right, which is just one-upmanship.
It's good, though, for editors, because then you get to 4K and you're... Anyways, doesn't matter. Does not matter at all. And we covered it all in the show already in Tech Talk Today. So that's 77. It's not even published yet because it's a big dog, but it'll be out soon. Plus, we had to get that... Oh, except for... Look how the BSD title renders on my Archbox here. It's just BSD and then a series of squares. Does not look so good.
You do not have the Unicode.
I don't. I guess not. But you know what? Now you know why. If that happens on your machine, you know the backstory. So you're welcome, everybody. But Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website or starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, this first email is really kind of cool. I'm pretty excited to say that we got an email in from folks over at DuckDuckGo, you know, the search engine that doesn't track you. They'd heard that I was taking the DuckDuckGo challenge and I'd put the Android search widget on my phone. And they wrote in, turns out there's a group of folks over at DuckDuckGo that watch TechSNAP and LAS pretty religiously. And so they wanted to reach out and sponsor the show and have us kind of talk about DuckDuckHack. So I started talking back and forth, and I said, so what is DuckDuckHack? And it turns out it's something that's been around for a little while, but it was new to me. It's DuckDuckGo's open source instant answer platform. And you can find it at duckduckhack.com. And it's sort of a unique opportunity for anyone to create an instant answer, which would then be showcased in the DuckDuckGo results. So say you're like Alan, perhaps.
So it's like those, when you Google certain things, you see this little box from Google where it has the answer to your question.
It's exactly like it's a way for people that are enthusiasts or experts about something like FreeBSD or ZFS or Arch Linux or whatever to go make search results on DuckDuckGo for those things more relevant, which is kind of neat. And really all you have to do is go to duckduckhack.com and submit a pull request for whatever topic you might want to create an answer for. DuckDuckGo's team will work with you to make sure it's like just all sort of prettied up and all those kinds of things. And they sent us in some examples too that are ones that were provided from the DuckDuckHack open source answer platform. Like you can type in DuckDuckGo, search Vim space help, and you can get a Vim cheat sheet right here in the DuckDuckGo search results. That was submitted by somebody sending an answer into the answer platform. Or
cool. I see another one here. They have, if you search Apache space Nginx, they have a bunch of articles from Stack Overflow and Serverfault.
Yeah,
it's like Nginx versus Apache. So which one do I want to use? Or using Apache with Nginx.
Or like, how about this one? Because I could use this for show research and avoid Reddit altogether. Reddit, and then you type in Reddit into DuckDuckGo and then space, and it will search Reddit through DuckDuckGo for those terms. And they have all kinds of things. Like you can search the Bitcoin blockchain. You can get weather from forecast.io because the guys over at Forecast.io went ahead and took advantage of this and tied in their API. It's really cool. And you can get started too. You can do it. Just go to duckduckhack.com, submit your pull request, and you really can bring more relevant search results and more privacy and open source to searching the web. And this is at duckduckhack.com. I think it's pretty neat. And so they reached out to us, and I wanted to talk about it because I'd never even heard about this. But you could see how, like, DuckDuckGo needs to really kind of bring some competition, and that the search market is pretty locked down right now, and this is sort of a way to make it more competitive, give it more relevant results, and I think one of the reasons they wanted to talk to the Jupiter Broadcasting audience is probably a lot of you out there are experts in things that need to be plugged into the system. So it's pretty neat. DuckDuckHack.com, and thanks to Zach for emailing in and telling us all about it. You guys can check it out. And go in there and tell them TechSNAP sent you. I think there's a spot in there where you can put that in there if you want. DuckDuckHack.com. And also try out the some of the helpers. So go to DuckDuckGo and put Vim and then type help. That cheat sheet is really awesome. And then, of course, you also get all the documentation search results. How cool is that? See, I've been using DuckDuckGo for like 2 weeks, and I didn't even know about this. It just keeps getting better and better.
Dan Langill from the chat room points out that he's worked with the DuckDuckGo people recently and says they're good people.
Yeah, well, I started talking to them after
Dan
this.
Dan is good people, so if he says they're good people, they're really good people.
I agree with him. I was pretty impressed after chatting with them. So Jeremy writes into the show with a correction from 182. We got a few people that wrote in around this topic, so I thought, all right, let's take it, because this is Jeremy's first time writing in. He says, I recently found Jupiter Broadcasting shows, and I'm hooked on TechSNAP. I have a long list of back shows to watch. I've watched around 18 of them, so I don't know how I didn't find you sooner, but here's my question. I was watching Zen Gets Bashed, and around the 1 hour, 20-minute mark, a question is asked about enabling the HTTPS for the Jupiter Broadcasting website. Alan mentioned that XP doesn't support SNI, but that's partially true. Microsoft chose to not support SNI in a system DLL, so Internet Explorer is a no-go. Ironically, Safari on XP calls the same file and does not support SNI. However, all other browsers on XP support SNI, including like Chrome and Firefox. He goes on to say that Alan raised the point of many subdomains. The way around this is a wildcard domain certificate that allows all subdomains at the domain to be secured.
Problem there is that the subdomains in question are not subdomains of JB.
And, now I'm not saying JB should go the all SSL route, but I thought I'd point out some technology does exist to help address the issue.
Yeah, and then he pointed out, well, when there's multiple domains, you can get a special multi-domain certificate, but that's more for a mail server where you're going to have, 6 different mail domains on one certificate. That's not, for that case, all those domains have to be owned by the same person, which isn't the case of the Scale Engine domain and the Jupiter Broadcasting domain. So it still causes quite a few complications.
Yes, it's something we continue to talk about. But
it's something we could do, but it'd be a lot of work for basically no gain. It doesn't really make any sense, honestly.
Peter Zowski writes in with ZFS Ghost Sectors questions. He says, "Hi, I was listening to an older show about 173ish, and I think somewhere in there, Alan kind of describes how ZFS makes sure that data written is safe with writing it to a new sector while keeping the old sector or block. I'm just wondering, in terms of encryption, let's say I mount a Windows BitLocker from ZFS mounted location, and I do stuff on it. I amend files, I paste new ones, and then I unmount it. What is happening with the old sectors and blocks that were left as fallback? Do they get deleted after the new block is written? Technically, if I delete the file parts of the old versions, are they still lying around somewhere on the drive? I know it would take ages for anybody to make sense of anything, but let's say this forensic investigation had unlimited funds. How do I nuke the file and everything related to it? I have ZFS Ubuntu. Can I wipe free space, like with 3 writes or something, like I did in Windows with CCleaner? Is there a way to force a full delete of a file somehow on ZFS? I'm not storing some highly sensitive stuff. I'm just kind of fantasizing here. But it's still, if there's a way, I'd like to know how to do it, just in case one day."
Well, this isn't really a special concern with ZFS, right? With any file system, when you overwrite a file, it's not guaranteed that it's going to overwrite it in place, right? If the file is slightly different size, then the drive might decide to allocate it differently. Now, ZFS just never, ever overwrites in place, so it's a little bit different. But using encryption is the right answer, basically. So that way, the old version of the file is sitting there encrypted. It can't, no one's going to be able to decrypt it any more than they would be able to decrypt the updated version of the file. So that, it's supposed to, the encryption is supposed to be solving the problem. But to answer the question about the way ZFS works, right, so you have your blocks and you decide I'm going to change these 2. So it writes 2 new ones somewhere else, and then it'll stop using these 2, and when they're not used anymore, they'll be deleted. The difference is snapshots, right? So you have all your blocks and you create a snapshot, then you overwrite those two files, right? And they get written to a new place. No extra space gets freed. You actually use up more space by overwriting those files. And then only once you delete the snapshot and no snapshot and no live file system is using those two blocks, do they then become free. But just like a regular hard drive, just because they're free doesn't mean they get overwritten with anything. And again, just like with a regular hard drive on NTFS or something, the only way to zero out all the blocks is basically to write zeros until the drive is full. So you'd have to delete all the snapshots and then completely fill the ZFS pool with zeros and a giant file full of zeros until it was full, and then delete that.
Okay.
Which isn't really a great thing to do.
No.
In general, the solution is encrypt the stuff, and then people can't read the old versions of it.
Right, yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so I wouldn't say the ZFS was any less secure than any other file system just because it's doing copy on write. Because fragments of your old files will be left behind on any file system. ZFS just makes sure that you never are missing that fragment when you need it.
Especially ButterFS, let me tell you what, Alan. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I've had ButterFS problems this week. I had Dropbox. Dropbox selective sync broke, and it pushed down all of my Dropbox content to all of my machines. So every machine in the studio Wednesday morning had a full hard drive that, yeah. Because I have a bunch of SSDs everywhere, so I don't have a ton of free space. Right. And so it pushed down 350 gigabytes worth of new data to all my machines. And one of them is running ButterFS, and ButterFS doesn't like that very much. And this is the fifth time I've filled the drive.
Yeah, and it gets worse every time you actually do fill it. Does it not have a reservation option?
Probably.
I don't know. I don't know about ButterFS. But yeah, I've taken on all of my ZFS machines, even though ZFS is, especially the newer versions, are much, much better about when you get full. I have a 100 gigabyte reservation on all of my pools, except for a couple that are only 100 gigabytes because they're a 128 gig SSD. But on all my drives that are a terabyte or more, 100 gigs is reserved just to avoid getting too fragmented, or basically it makes alarm goes off sooner if it's getting near full, and it doesn't allow. The nice thing with ZFS is you can create both quotas, which mean this Dropbox folder can't ever get bigger than this big, or reservations saying my log directory is guaranteed to have at least this much space, so nobody else can steal that space and cause me to be out of space for my logs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm sure ButterFS has exactly the same set of features, or pretty close anyway, but it's a lot less mature and has a lot of problems still.
Yeah. Hey, you know what we need?
It's a property of copy on write file systems. No matter what the copy on write file system is, it's going to be bad when it gets full.
I'll tell you what we need, Alan. We need emails. We need your questions. We need anything you want to send to the TechSNAP show, and pick one of our brains, probably Alan's brain. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, or links.techsnap.tv, or email us directly, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. We have gone, I believe now, through our entire inbox. We were running a little behind, but I think now I went through 2 weeks, and I think there's no unread emails. So if it didn't get answered, you can send it in again, or if you want to have a good shot of getting it on air, now's your chance. So go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and click more contact.
Emails. Otherwise, we can't really do a feedback segment.
Right.
So please send us email.
Send them into the show,
and we not something I normally say to people.
Right, I know. Well, and it's funny because usually what happens is we ask and we get a lot, and that's fine because we can stretch it out. So if we do get a lot, we can make that work too. But it's a good chance, and chances are you might be working on a project as the fall season rolls around. So
even if you already know the answer, just if it's a question other people are likely to have too.
Yeah, something that might help people.
You can share.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Alan. Well, with the TechSNAP feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup stories just didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to cover them and give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And some of these links came from our incredible subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, our first story, I swear, every time we cover these credit card breaches, it's a place that my wife frequents. Every single time. This week...
Well, they're mostly places that everyone frequents.
Dairy Queen, 395 stores.
Yes, we already talked about the Dairy Queen one a couple weeks ago, but this is the actual confirmation.
Now, the funny thing is they only broke it out to 16 stores in Georgia. What's up with that?
Maybe there are only 16 Dairy Queens in Georgia. I don't know. Also, we don't have a link for it, but if you go to Krebs' site, it's got that one. Kmart also had a breach based on malware.
Malware. Yes.
We don't have Kmarts in Canada anymore.
Yeah, there's not many Kmarts here either. Not very many. So Intel's subsidiary is having a fine of some kind.
Wind River, which is actually the company that bought BSDI, which is the company that originally sold the BSD operating system. So they kind of have a relation to BSD, although not really anymore. They mostly make VxWorks and embedded operating systems for like Mars rovers and stuff. Anyway, Intel bought them a while ago, but they're paying a $750,000 fine, which is $750,000, for exporting encryption software to governments and organizations on the U.S. entity list of terrorists and governments that they don't want having that kind of thing. It does kind of raise the question of, it's like, well, I'm sure that Wind River's fancy encryption isn't anything better than you can get from open source, so how does that work? But basically...
It's branded.
It's a violation of the Wassenaar Agreement, which is the arms trading, cybersecurity thing that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah.
Like selling 0 days is also against the Wassenaar Agreement. But it's interesting to find out the Reuters article didn't have any details, and the story came to my attention when one of the FreeBSD developers was like, does anybody know anything more about this? Because since some of their stuff is BSD based, it doesn't seem like they'd have any encryption that we don't. And how does that work?
That's my question.
And it's like, obviously, if it was something that was available open source, they could have used that as a defense and not had to pay this fine. So, what is it? Or, are they vain enough that they're going to pay this fine to not admit that their cryptography product is just some open source package?
I bet it's all about the branding, Alan. It's all about the magic.
Well, being branded as helping the Chinese isn't exactly a good thing either, is it?
No. In fact, that takes us to our next roundup story. The FBI is warning people in industry, I don't know who exactly, of Chinese cyber campaigns that are state-sponsored. On Wednesday, the FBI issued a private warning to industry groups of highly skilled Chinese government hackers that were in the midst of a long-running campaign to steal valuable data from U.S. companies and government agencies. This is a quote. These state-sponsored hacks are exceedingly stealthy and agile by comparison to the People's Liberation Army Unit 61398, whose activity was publicly disclosed and attributed to security researchers in February 2013. Said an FBI in its alert, and it referred to a Chinese military hacker unit exposed, and we've talked about it here on the show, the ones that Mandiant exposed. So they say they're more agile.
So they're saying that there's a new attack by people even better than those people.
That's what they're saying. And they're
those are the
saying
ones that hacked
state-sponsored.
the New York Times and had the persistence, so like they were using a printer or the air conditioning system or something to reinfect the machines.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, well, in the generic part of that at the beginning, it sounds like just them saying the same stuff they're always saying. The Chinese are hacking everything. It's like,
so is this one of those stories where we'll get little bits of details trickled out over time, and as more questions are asked, like it'll sound...
I don't actually know.
Yeah. You probably caught this story about these Dropbox passwords. Well, now, wait a minute. Was it actually Dropbox passwords that leaked out, or was it maybe other sites that...
Yes and no, kind of. So, yes, there was this story that people saying that Dropbox was hacked or whatever. It turns out Dropbox was not actually hacked. It was just that in some other hack, people got this giant list of usernames and passwords. And as we've talked about many, many times, someone was smart and said, I'm going to try these usernames and passwords against Dropbox.
Yeah, insert popular name of service.
Giant lists of them that worked.
Yes.
You could tell that, you could kind of guess that was going on when you saw the pastebin leaks. And they were all people with passwords of like birthdays, right? It was like 1984-0721 or something.
Yeah.
Or, some guy's password was like the name of a sports team or a bunch of other ones like that.
So,
hold on, I have a list of them here. There's some hilarious ones.
I don't know, but the initial
Leon Kennedy, TUTU22. That's a password. Flower, pained balloon.
But it sounds like that initial 7 million figure that the leakers were using was maybe bogus.
Completely bogus.
Yeah.
They only
Dropbox at
ever
about
leaked a couple
700.
hundred they only leaked a couple, like 50 or 100 at a time.
Yeah.
Like looking at the first list here, it looks like everything that starts with the letters BL is their list, and that's a total of less than 100. So hard to say, but there's some hilarious passwords on here like scissors, Kawasaki, flower balloon, animal.
Oh, flower balloon sounds pretty.
Telephone, 13, password spelled with the letter number 5 instead of S's.
And regardless, Dropbox has been forcing password resets when they've detected logins and whatnot on these.
Yes, and I think they expired all passwords that haven't been changed at least so long ago and stuff.
There you go.
Password looking, Hannah. January spelled with an I, which might just be French.
Let me tell you about a
ABC123. I don't even know why that's allowed. It's only 6 characters. Trust no one. Obviously, trust everyone.
Let me tell you about a little program called LastPass, ladies and gentlemen. Go get it. Or KeyPass. I don't care. All right. We should probably talk about Drupal because Drupal 7 users need to patch. Drupal has patched a critical SQL injection vulnerability in version 7.x of the content management system that could allow arbitrary code execution. The flaw lies in an API that's specifically designed to help prevent against SQL injection attacks, so that's a bit ironic. Drupal 7 includes a database abstraction API to ensure that queries executed against the database are sanitized to prevent these kinds of attacks. But the vulnerability in this API allows an attacker to send a specifically crafted request, resulting in an arbitrary SQL execution. Depending on the content of the request, this can lead to privilege escalation and arbitrary PHP execution or other types of attacks. So Drupal users, time to go patch, my friends. Time to go patch. Snap, snap, snap. Patch OS. Android on Intel x86 tablet performance is being explored, and it looks like things could be getting better. Are you excited, Alan?
Yes, so this is the x86 processors, the new Atom ones for tablets and phones, and basically they found that now they're about equal performance to ARM as far as, I guess, battery life and computing performance.
Hey-o.
And they're starting to actually show up in tablets for under $200 from Acer, Dell, and all the regular people who buy tablets from.
And without fans, right? I mean, they're like thin actual tablets, which is cool. And I don't know if you saw this, but yesterday Google announced the Nexus Play, which is a tiny little set-top box that uses an Intel Atom x86 CPU. It's an Android set-top box for your TV that uses the quad-core Intel Atom processor. Yep. Pretty cool.
Because, there's the 2 different Intel processors. One's dual-core with hyper-threading, one's actually quad-core. The difference is one of them uses the Intel GPU, and one of them has a PowerVR separate GPU.
Yeah. Okay, so this next story, I'm still scratching my head trying to figure out how this works, and the technical details, as far as I can tell, are a bit sparse. Microsoft has announced they're partnering with Docker. Docker is teaming up with Microsoft to bring its open container technology to the next release of Windows Server, due out
Right. The reason the technical details are missing is because they haven't started yet. They're like, yes, let's do that.
Here's what they say. The Docker engine will work with the next release of Windows Server, and images will be available in Docker Hub. So here's the problem I have with the Docker engine. The Docker engine is like the Linux kernel with namespace support. So how do you move that over to Windows?
Sorry, the Docker engine is the glue that uses the Linux
scripts?
container stuff.
It's the scripts?
Yeah, it's everything that just uses the Linux kernel to create the container and put the stuff in it.
How do you move that to Windows, though?
Well, the Docker engine is being ported to be able to run on FreeBSD using jails instead of containers. So I can imagine it would be just as easy to port it to Windows and use some other thing.
It would run Windows applications.
Yes. Right, it would be using Docker to run. Well, a lot of the things you run in Docker are like a Ruby script. It doesn't really matter what operating system it's running on because it's a.
See, the part I don't get is they say that they're gonna. I guess that means there'll be other images in the Docker Hub that. See, right now,
I'm guessing there'll be Windows Docker images.
Yeah,
you wouldn't grab the same image you would run on Linux on Windows.
So they say that the open source runtime that builds, runs, and orchestrates containers will work with the next release of Windows Server.
Right.
Docker engine images for Windows Server will be available.
Docker engine is just the control system that then starts either a Linux container or a FreeBSD jail or whatever the Windows equivalent.
So they will have they'll have Windows, so no one's going to use this, basically.
Well, apparently somebody might. Microsoft is trying to get all those young agile developers to work on Microsoft as a platform.
Docker Hub will also integrate into Microsoft Azure. Wow, so you'll be able to send from Docker Hub to Azure.
the idea here
that's
is
pretty cool.
basically more pre-made images to run in their cloud.
So you'll log in the Docker Hub and you can one click spin it up on Azure. That's pretty slick.
Do they already have that for doing it on like EC2 or Rackspace or somewhere?
You can use interfaces. Like you can actually do it with DigitalOcean too, if you just use the right bridge.
Right. So if you have it the right set of stuff, you can just shoot a Docker image over to a DO instance.
But wow, look at Microsoft getting all in on this, huh?
Well, I
guess they need to.
I've kind of complained about before. Docker is like this whole is kind of turned into this very
buzzy
commercial company.
Yeah.
Jumping up and down. Like they have a conference before they had a release of the product.
Yeah.
And such, right?
Yes.
And they're like, oh, I guess we should maybe actually consider security as a thing at some point.
So I love it when Adobe is offering security lessons, and this time it's one to Oracle. Click to play.
Well, specifically, Adobe says if Oracle had just done the click-to-play thing they did about a year ago, years before that, we wouldn't have had all these Java 0 days. Now, it's like, well, Adobe doesn't use click-to-play, and, the first reason for that is, the biggest use of Adobe Flash currently is in the ads on websites, and if you had to click to play them, no one would ever see the ads, and that would ruin the whole industry.
Oh, my gosh, that is why, probably.
Oh, I love the register's subtitle is Pots and Kettles and Heated Arguments.
Yes, God, that is good.
But specifically, his actual point more was that the strategy is ice more zero-day attacks against Adobe Reader and Flash and sped the time to patch from 10 weeks to 36 hours. So specifically what he's saying is that instead of patching the flaws every time they pop up, they should work on making the stuff harder to break and to basically building mitigation so that when there is an exploit, it can't do as much bad stuff.
And it sounds like a quote from him sounds like this is he's kind of bottom line here. The bad guys aren't stupid. They're going to apply their resources in the most cost-effective way possible, and so they'll seek to minimize the cost of developing an exploit.
Right. Now, the one that's made me kind of laugh was, remember earlier we were talking about, the nation states and stuff? Well, they claim that whenever we see an exploit against Reader or Flash, we assume it's the result of a nation-state adversary who makes an initial investment in developing the exploit. Once that initial investment is made, it's very cheap and easy to adapt.
Yes.
So every time there's a flaw in Flash, they assume it was a nation-state behind it, not just somebody else, which isn't true all of the time.
But that's a pretty scary thought, just even if it's true half the time.
Yeah, and then they say at the bottom, Russian VXers and carders are particularly capable of reappropriating nation-state developed 0 days. And it's like, well, unless the nation-state is using the 0 day against the Russian carders, how do the Russian carders get a hold of it in the first place? I wouldn't say that just because the Russian carders have a Flash exploit, that they got it from a nation-state. They have some talented people that are just as good as the people the government can hire.
No, but to
develop these
does
exploits.
Draw interesting parallels where, But
yes, if there is some collusion between, say, the Russian government and the Russian crime bosses, or
I was thinking of something darker than that. I was thinking how the U.S. sends arms to terrorists to do their bidding, and then they have to then a decade later go back and fight those very terrorists they armed and trained. Here, the U.S. could be developing exploits, and then they go in and get released in the wild, and then they have to go fight the very cyber criminals that they helped create.
Yes, but if it doesn't seem that very often, if you're making this malware to target very specific things, I don't see how the Russians are going to get a hold of it. Especially
that's the part I don't understand either.
In particular, the example they're talking about in this article says Adobe suspects one recent attack was a product of a team of a dozen engineers, complete with a product manager, who developed the payload over several months.
Wow!
The attack was deployed against a single staffer at an unnamed Middle East bank. So they think that dozens of people worked for months to come up with this virus to get this one person's computer.
Could you imagine?
It's entirely possible that the government was doing that. A government was doing that. But how does the virus then get in the hands of the Russian carders?
Right.
And if it is, then I suspect that maybe the exploit wasn't as hard to develop as you think it was. It could have been one guy spending a week and I have exploited Flash. Them claiming that they think every exploit against them had to have been done by a nation state because it would be too hard for one guy to do is conflating their ego a little too much.
Right, I can see that too. Yep. I bet it's a little bit of from column A.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love this because I am sure had it with Comcast. I'd like to tell Comcast to go shove it. This is a great story. The City Council of Worcester, I think is how you say it. I think it's Worcester, Massachusetts, a 180,000 person city, is telling Comcast to go shove it because they suck so hard.
So the City Council voted to not approve the license that Comcast needed to come into the area or whatever. Now, the controller of the town or whatever doesn't actually have to go by that, but basically they're urging him to just let it expire and not let Comcast come in.
Comcast has been so awful lately here at the studios. It's been interrupting shows. This story on Krebs' blog is interesting. Who's watching your WebEx? Is this like a case of just really negligent passwords?
When I saw the headline, I assumed it was like the NSA snooping in on WebEx.
Yeah, right.
But it turns out what it is companies just setting up their WebEx conferences and deciding it's easier to make sure people show up by just not having a password.
Jeez. I can see that. I can totally see people doing that.
And so, but because WebEx has two modes, basically, one mode is for private meetings and one mode is for doing like product demonstrations where you want random people to come up and watch. Sometimes these private meetings end up on the with no password. WebEx assumes that means that you're trying to promote it, and so it goes on the calendar. So you can show up you can just go to the WebEx site, load up their calendar, and see what stuff is going on.
Oh my gosh!
Decide to jump in and watch.
Hilarious.
And Krebs found in the meeting center that he could decide to dive into meetings from Charles Schwab, CSC, CBS, the TV station, CVS, the drugstore, the U.S. Department of Energy, Fannie Mae, Jones Day, Orbitz, the I guess it's a travel site, and Paycheck Service, and Union Pacific.
Wow. That's ridiculous, Alan.
And some entities even allow access to archived event recordings. So you can just go back and watch a meeting that they thought was private.
Reporters should be doing this.
And, the interesting thing there is, unlike a live meeting, no one's going to be there to see that you watched it.
This is
like
probably
doing a live meeting, if an extra person walks in.
They would see a little notice. Yeah.
But if it's just the recording, then it's like, yes, put a password on it. Come on, people. So Cisco's began reaching out to these companies about a week ago, and today released an all-customer alert pointing customers to the Consolidated Best Practices document written for Cisco WebEx site administrators and users.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, although it's still going to continue to go on. So a little pro tip for you TechSNAP fans out there that want to get the 411 on something, just go see if you can squat on their WebEx.
So actually, it turns out it was Krebs that found this. And so in Cisco's alert, they say, in the first week of October, we were contacted by a leading security researcher. He showed us that some WebEx customer sites were publicly displaying meeting information online, including meeting time, topic, host, duration, and some sites even allowed the join a meeting link and the archives. And Cisco also has a blog post over there that you can go check out.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to go watch some of the most boring things that human beings can do on the face of this earth, there's now a way you can do it. Right there. WebEx meetings. Nothing but the best of the best for you, ladies and gentlemen. TechSNAP digs it up for you. Okay, last story in the roundup this week. Maybe we could just have a bit of infrastructure as a service crisis looming.
Yes, so Canalysys, which is a company that does this type of thing, estimates, based on the public disclosures, that Amazon Web Services lost $2 billion in the last 4 quarters, or over the last year. And is forecasting a loss of between $400 and $800 million for this quarter. They're basically, I guess, basing this on the fact that Amazon did the big price cut. Now, the weird thing is Amazon was leading that, so it doesn't seem like it's not like they were forced to cut their prices by their competitors cutting their prices. So,
yeah, see, the thing is that comes down for Amazon is there's 2 things that I think Amazon has really got going for it. Number one is that they kind of need this infrastructure anyways, right? Right,
yeah, they're building this infrastructure. Basically, this whole thing started as, hey, we have all these extra computers we keep around because on Black Friday we need extra servers.
Right.
So before the cloud, there was nothing they could do.
So that's a different way to calculate the costs and probably how they're directly cut. And I've also read
and the other thing is that Amazon doesn't break out their profits into different units, right? So if their shoe sales are losing a lot of money, it all gets lumped together, so it's hard to say.
So I look at that and I go, okay, so that's one thing, is they can afford to have it run at a loss. But the other thing about Amazon is, they lose money at everything. Everything. Amazon doesn't make money. They don't make money. So they've lost money forever. They always have. They're backed by investors, and that's because they are aggressively trying to take market share, and they're doing it by essentially doing things as cheap as possible. And that's how they garner brand loyalty, is by being cheap all the time. And like this article points out, I mean, like the CIA now has infrastructure on AWS.
Netflix, all their data science is on AWS.
See, they compare it to a meltdown in the proportions of the banking sector. I think that's...
Well, basically their point is that Amazon only has $5 billion in cash laying around. If they keep losing $2 billion a year, that won't last very long.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's not like they're in debt and don't have any cash laying around and losing money.
We are definitely in some kind of race to the bottom price-wise. That doesn't seem long-term sustainable.
So I guess their point isn't so much... this originally came up from a question on Slashdot, and I used the other link instead. But the point is, especially with smaller cloud providers, if you're not using Amazon or someone else, do you have a backup plan in case your provider goes away?
Yeah.
Or more importantly, even if you are using Amazon, and it's unlikely event they are going to go away, how do you get your 10 terabytes of data out? Even if you have a giant fat pipe to your location or something,
where are you going to store
it's still going to take you weeks to download all that data. And if Amazon's going out of business, you might not have that much time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen cloud providers before where they just had no notice. It was just like they kept it quiet until it's like, okay, today we're turning everything off. And it's like, so maybe you actually need a legally enforceable agreement with your cloud provider that they will return your data to you in a format you can use in a reasonable amount of time. And, you know, maybe you need an agreement with a second cloud provider to be a hot standby and such. So, you know, just because it's the cloud doesn't mean you don't need to consider stuff. Even if you're using Amazon for your cloud, if you only have one instance running on Amazon, that can go down. Amazon doesn't guarantee that doesn't go down. They just guarantee that if you have multiple availability zones or multiple data centers,
you have a better shot.
That a problem that affects one shouldn't affect the other ones, right? And so, yeah, it's you'd have to. There's a lot more to consider than just use the cloud, as we saw with Belkin the other week.
Oh my gosh!
It's like, we have our own private cloud. It's like, well, just because it's a private cloud doesn't mean it's any more robust than just having a server, right? If you have one VM running in a cloud, that's the same as having a server
behind a single connection, behind a single firewall.
The cloud doesn't mean that it's any better. And yes, it's behind the same firewall that made the same mistake.
Yeah. All right, so we got links to everything we've talked about today in the show notes, additional information. Also, don't forget about DuckDuckHack. Go check that out and submit some answers. I bet a lot of you out there have answers for things people are searching about. And last but not least, we definitely want your emails. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, links.techsnap.tv, where you can send in links for our roundup or maybe even the main news section of the show. And last but not least, please join us live Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Boom! And jblive.info for the audio-only edition of the TechSNAP show. We've also got those RSS feeds you can grab. Subscribe to those and get the show automatically when it's published late Thursday on the Pacific side. The best side. Whoop, nope, nothing. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.